some Jews and Christians actually use this as like a polemic against Islam, that there's a verse that says that the disbelievers from among the people of the book, so meaning the Jews and the Christians and the mushrikeen, so the pagan sort of idol worshippers, those people, it says, are the worst of living creatures and they will be in hellfire. And people say, well, hold on, Jake, that's pretty rough. Why would this be one of your favorite surahs? I'll tell that in just a minute how it relates to that. But then the next verse right after that says, those who believe in Allah and do good deeds, those are the best of living creatures. And then he explains what is going to be the reward for those people. It's going to be paradise, and explaining things and so on and so forth. Now, some people who are polemical against Islam say, but hold on a second, isn't that such harsh language that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or God in the Quran, is saying that the Jews and Christians are the worst of living creatures? But in the context, why is it? It's not that they're like a different race or anything like that. No, of course, they're all human beings. But what makes them the worst of living creatures is them being presented with the message of Islam from the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, who we believe is the greatest of all mankind, and rejecting him and his message. That's what makes them the worst of living creatures. Not because they were, created worst of living creatures out of the womb of their mothers or anything like that. Not at all. And there's another verse in the Quran actually that says, those who don't use their reason, those who don't use their aql, those are the worst of living creatures. So when you put these together, you can understand why are they the worst of living creatures? Because they don't accept the Prophet, peace be upon him. They're not actually using their aql, their common sense reason, to understand that he is a true prophet and messenger of God, that he's not a liar, that he's not distorting the truth or anything like that. And from a theological point of view, that the Christians are not using their reason, because if they did, they wouldn't believe that Jesus is God and man at the same time, or that God is 1 and 3, or that Jesus died for your sins. None of these things make sense. So if they actually use their sense, then they would come to accepting Islam and start, rejecting this nonsense that they're, on. And the same thing with the Jews as well. Now, like I said, people may think, oh, but Brother Jake, isn't this harsh? But here's the other thing about this surah, that for me, coming from a Christian background and talking about my difficulties with my family, I recite this surah because I have to remind myself that my ultimate obligation is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That even though I love and care for my family and some of my friends who may be non-Muslims, at the end of the day, I have to accept that my ultimate obligation and commitments are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Islam. And no matter how much I, don't like it to say or to see my family in the hellfire, I have to accept it. Just like the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he had to accept that some of his own family members, some of his own close family members who he loved, were not actually guided, who died upon kufr.